Next, from Springfield, we attend a press conference where the head of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce is joined by representatives of the transportation industry as they discuss the negative effects the budget impasse has had on Illinois' transportation infrastructure. This runs about 30 minutes.
Hello, my name is Todd Meisch. I'm President and CEO of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. I'm also co-chair of the Transportation for Illinois Coalition, and I'm here with other coalition members. TFIC is really the leading advocate for investment in our vital infrastructure, transportation-related infrastructure in the state of Illinois, so I'm very proud to head up this group and be joined by these austere gentlemen here today and really the entire coalition. So we are here today to make a strong call for a stopgap budget funding measure that fully funds transportation investments in the next fiscal year. As we all know, that the budget impasse has really put all sorts of funding at risk, but transportation is unique in that we are very, very time sensitive, even more so, I would say, than education, which has gotten an awful lot of attention. So we think that transportation should be taken care of. Other spending plans should also be on the table as well, but transportation is very, very much at risk and needs to be at the forefront of discussion about a stopgap funding measure that we hope that the legislature will come back, work with the governor, and get completed here, and we're all in agreement that we want to go ahead and see that funding. Businesses, I think we all know how important transportation is and how much of our economy is dependent upon our vital transportation infrastructure. We've got thousands of jobs that have just been announced, especially just out of even one company like Amazon. They're here for distribution. They were very impressed by our system that we have here that allows them to get to 1 hour delivery and move their goods other places, yet that system is very much at risk. I would point out that for the very first time that we know of, the condition of roads that are acceptable has fallen below 80%, now it's 79%. And if you don't fund transportation on a timely basis, you risk losing an entire construction season. And think about that. An entire construction season can be lost because of the weather if we don't go ahead and get something passed by July 1st. So what does 79% look like after losing the entire construction season, no maintenance, no expansion at all? We think that the roads are already very ragged now and that citizens across the state are going to realize that their road system is crumbling if we lose an entire construction season. So we think that's very, very important. We want to make sure the legislature and the governor put transportation in the very top tier of priorities as they discuss a resolution, even if it's a temporary resolution to this budget problem. It's very important that $1.8 billion that was announced gets taken care of. We need a longer term solution, no doubt about it. We need a major investment to keep our systems going, so we need a new capital bill, but in the meantime, while the budget impasse is going, we just want to make sure the legislature and the governor are focused on not losing an entire construction season. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my TFIC co-chair, Michael Kleinek.
Thanks, Todd. My name is Michael Kleinek. I'm the Executive Director with the Chicago Labor's District Council, LMCC. I am the Labor Co-Chair for Transportation for Illinois Coalition. TFIC estimates that Illinois is at risk of the 2016 road and infrastructure construction season due to the state's budget impasse. This would result in immediate loss of 25,000 middle-class jobs and cost the taxpayers approximately $3 million a day to keep motorists safe around the construction sites. So it's very important that if the middle class, if we don't have the jobs, then they can't purchase stuff in their area, and it's going to hurt the economy in the state of Illinois. I'd like to, with that, turn it over to Bill Fry with the AGCI to give a perspective on the local impact.
Hi, my name is Bill Fry. I'm the Executive Director of the Associated General Contractors of Illinois, and indeed the local system is part of this dilemma too. That funding supports cities, townships, and counties, and they've had a much worse shortfall in funding on their end over the last 6 years. So that monies that are coming in for this summer are even more important to keep those systems functioning.
Good morning. My name's Don Schaefer. I'm Executive Vice President of Midwest Truckers Association. Illinois' infrastructure, of course, is the backbone of Illinois' economy. Transportation, Distribution, and Logistics, TD&L, is the fastest growing segment of the Illinois economy. Without a strong infrastructure program, we cannot expand on both an economic and, in this situation, on a safety basis. You know, transportation funding is crucial. Both right now, we're talking short and long term. We're hoping that the leaders of the General Assembly and the executive leadership face a reality that we need the short-term funding. It's crucial right now, and even long-term, because we need to grow. We cannot fall behind. As you've heard already, the condition of Illinois roads are falling behind, and without a comprehensive program that guarantees funding for both short-term and long-term for our roads and bridges, it's just going to get worse. I'll turn it over to Matt Hart.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Matt Hart, Executive Director of the Illinois Trucking Association. Trucking in Illinois employs 279,000 people. That's 1 out of every 18 jobs. And we rely, of course, on highways to safely deliver the goods that consumers want. Our industry already pays $10,000 per truck per year in state user fees. We pay $9,000 per truck per year in federal user fees. It's very important that we have a robust and safe highway network out there for our members to use. We implore the leaders and the governor to pass a comprehensive solution to our transportation needs in Illinois so that we can continue to serve this state. Trucking delivers over 70%, or nearly 70% of the nation's freight. That's more than twice all the other modes combined. So that's how important trucking is to the state of Illinois. It's how important it is to the Chicagoland area and to all the areas of the country that we serve from Illinois. Also, we're imploring that the transportation solution also include funding for IFTA. IFTA is the International Fuel Tax Agreement. Right now, the state of Illinois has not been able to make payments to other states for IFTA. This is an interstate program where you collect motor fuel tax to pay, that interstate trucking pays as they go from state to state to state. Right now, the state of Illinois owes over $9 million to the other IFTA jurisdictions. We also owe over $4 million to Illinois-based companies who have overpaid IFTA and have not been issued their refunds. It's money that the state of Illinois has collected but does not have the legal authority to make those payments. Of course, we also risk losing our status in IFTA because we haven't paid, and if the state of Illinois does not make their payments in IFTA, and if IFTA should happen to kick Illinois out of that program, that would be detrimental to the trucking industry because it would mean that every truck coming into the state of Illinois would have to get a permit, and every truck leaving the state of Illinois would also have to get a permit. And of course, those permits would have to be administered. This is something that's already done through IFTA. We haven't made our IFTA payments since the fiscal year began last July. So we're hopeful that we can get a solution that will allow us to come up to date with IFTA and keep trucking and freight moving throughout Illinois. Thank you very much.
So just to wrap up, I think that the IFTA issue is a great example of how there's money on hand and just the getting the legislature to act to do something so obviously important. Think about anybody who's been on I-80 knows the truck traffic on there. Having every single one of those trucks have to stop as they come in or as they leave is something that's truly amazing. So the other thing I'd point out is that a lot of this is federal money. This is money that we're entitled to, that we've come out of Washington, our leaders have gotten for us. It's a big, big part of our money is federal money, not even our state resources. We can't spend that federal money, and potentially it could be lost to other states if we were to not be able to spend the money that's been allocated to us. So there are a lot of good dot points there for folks that talk about what funds need to be allocated and the different points. So I think they did a good job of, I think the materials really do a good job of pointing out the specific items that the legislature and the governor need to agree to go ahead and act on, and we act. And so we know what needs to be done. All there needs to be is the political will to realize what a terrible travesty it would be if we were not to get a construction season done here. The quality of the roads would plummet, jobs lost, and long-term devastating impact on the Illinois economy. So we need to go ahead and get something that's very simple, get it done by July 1st. And we're calling for a stopgap funding, as well as serious discussions on a long-term investment that is so much needed by the state. So with that, unless there's anything else people want to add, we'll go ahead and take questions.
$1.8 billion in federal money at risk?
That's the total program.
That's the total 6-year program?
Yeah.
And as far as state money, road fund money doesn't need appropriation, does it? You
Yes,
just
it does, yes.
appropriate each year? So there's no, without action, there's no construction at all.
Right.
Well, what would that look like? Do you have projects that are starting now that would stop on the first, or that wouldn't start after the first, or how, what would it look?
Well, fortunately, we don't know for certain because it's not happened before. But I think that there are contingency plannings, and Bill's probably the best to speak to that, longtime, great IDOT employee there. But yeah, you've got to start to set it down. You've got to mothball projects that are already in place. Now, I will tell you that we think that the IDOT has been proceeding as though they don't expect this to happen, and we're going to decide that that's a good sign, that there is will. But if it were, then yes, all the work that you see that's going on out on the highways right now you've got to find a way to mothball it, and that's obviously would be a terrible situation.
How'd the program go in FY16 without an appropriation?
No, the governor signed that. So there are two parts of the budgets that Democrats passed that the governor did sign. Initially, he signed education, which everybody knows about and talks about, but a little bit later, I think there was a little bit of a delay, he decided that, hey, not signing the transportation piece would be terrible. We wouldn't have had construction going on over the last 12 months. So he did sign it last time. I think given the opportunity, he would sign it again, but because education isn't yet resolved, I'm speaking only from the chamber here, I think politically, a stopgap that includes education, transportation, and some of these operational things is what needs to happen if we can't get to a comprehensive deal here over the short term.
What happened to no budget without reforms? Why can't you just be along with the social services and universities that aren't getting funded? What's changed?
Well, I think that this is about economic development. This is about underpinnings of the economy. And if you have this kind of loss of jobs that we're talking about and the overall investment, then the overall economy gets hurt, and all those other people who are funded from taxes that are generated from economic opportunity, those folks are facing even worse long-term situations. So we think this is an immediate issue and one that should be taken care of right
It
now.
looks to me like you're backing off of no budget without reforms.
I'm not speaking for the administration or anybody else. We still want reforms, but we're here to talk about the immediate issue of transportation that's before us today.
Let me point out one other way where what you're saying is diverging from the message or non-message from the governor's office. Amazon, they're building facilities here. Whole Foods has built a facility in Illinois, moved here from Indiana of all places. You wouldn't know it from hearing from the governor's office or DCEO or the ILB EDC. They've hid that light under a bushel, or they think that it's not a light at all for whatever reason. They won't put out a news release or barely acknowledge it. So what gives?
I can't speak for the administration. I don't work for them, and I don't know. That's a question for them.
You know, it seems to me it's good news that they ought to be touting. For some reason, they're not. It must not be worth that much.
Like I said, you're going to have to ask the administration about that.
So, how many jobs again would actually be lost, and then if a funding bill came in, let's say August 1st instead of July 1st, is it too late at that point?
There's some impact, there's no doubt about it. Again, Bill can probably talk to the logistics of it a little bit better than I can, but clearly, we want to focus on a July 1st, so you get the full $1.8 billion that's there, and put those people to work and get those projects done. But clearly, the longer it goes, the worse it gets. Again, just speaking for the chamber, as I size things up politically, the closer you get to the election, the more the momentum will be, the inertia will be greater and greater in erring to the side of doing nothing. So we really need to take advantage of these next few days to go ahead and get action done. If you get in, later you get, in my opinion, the more likely it is that this gets put off till November, and November, you've lost the entire
Is
season.
there any, Bill, you want to talk on that issue? I mean, I never heard any numbers. What are we talking about? Would you go to the microphone?
Again, I'm Bill Fry with Associated General Contractors. Our large contractors can last longer in managing their cash flow. Who gets hurt first and possibly goes out of business are the small contractors and the minority contractors. So eventually the state stops paying without that appropriation. Then it's a question of how long a contractor can manage his cash flow until he has to pull the plug on a construction project, and he can no longer get loans from his bank. So it's a stagger as you go into the summer. You start losing some early, and then as the bigger jobs shut down from lack of payment, you're going to lose those a little later. But at the end of the day, it's up to the Illinois Department of Transportation on where that plug is pulled. It could be July 1st. They're probably making plans for how do you shut them all down because there's no way to make payments after July 1st. Whether that happens or not, or they ask our contractors to carry that burden into part of July and maybe August 1st, we'll have to wait and see.
So this would be equivalent of a department store losing the Christmas season for road construction people to miss the summer season.
Excellent.
So if you miss it, even if funds come through retroactively at some point, I mean, aren't we going to drive a number of these people permanently out of business because they just won't have the ability to recoup?
Two things there. The funding's there. It's appropriation that's lacking. The motor fuel taxes have been paid. The federal government has the money for Illinois. The appropriation is what needs to be passed in order to keep these jobs going. And yes, you're exactly right with your analogy of going out of business. Sometimes they can't survive.
Are you saying FY17 projects have begun?
No.
Contracts have been let?
No. FY17 will start being let on the June letting, which is tomorrow.
And contractors will go ahead and
They
bid on
cannot
projects?
execute a June, or a fiscal 17 contract till there's an appropriation.
And so the work that's being done now is leftover work? Does that not need reappropriation?
It needs reappropriation. It cannot be paid, any work after July 1st cannot be paid for without a reappropriation of the fiscal $16.
So some of them are working for free right now?
Not yet. They will be July 1st.
But there's construction going on now.
Absolutely.
What is that?
That's all of the 16. Yeah, there's close to $2 billion in leftover projects from 16. They're still cleaning up some 15 work. You drive anywhere, you're going to see construction projects. They're in full swing. You got 12 hours, 13, 14 hours of daylight. This is the time to get work done in an efficient manner and make it more reasonable for our taxpayers. But, yeah, we're just, 20 days away.
How much does the state need to appropriate to get the federal money?
The full appropriation is 1.8 billion.
That was the full.
Yeah, that's for the full program, yeah.
That's for the state?
That's well, federal's funding probably about 80% of that.
Okay.
Or probably more now because the MFT, motor fuel tax revenues have decreased so much.
Well, I'm sorry, 1.8 billion is the whole program for FY17?
That's correct.
And 80% of that is?
At least 80%, probably more, probably closer to 90, because of the declining revenues from our motor fuel tax.
Which illustrates, again, why we need a long-term solution for state resources. We're so almost totally dependent on federal money at this point.
So, so if you're saying that 80–90% of that is federal money, then the state only needs to appropriate 180 million?
No, even though it's pass-through money, you still have to have the okay to spend it, even if it's from a different source. The state legislature controls all the monies that come into Illinois from whatever source that is. So we still need their okay or their appropriation to spend those federal funds.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering what the split was.
On federal, first, typically, over the life of the Illinois Department of Transportation, we always call it 80-20.
Okay.
I mean, but again, as we've fallen into dire straits on the transportation system here in Illinois, it's creeping up to 90-10.
Don Schaefer with the Midwest Truckers Association. You had just participated in the Transportation for Illinois Coalition, and we heard how construction could come to a grinding halt if spending authority is not passed in time for the July 1 new fiscal year. What other implications might there be besides just those who are operating on the construction projects currently who would lose those positions if we don't have a spending authority passed.
Well, really, you're looking at the trickle-down. I mean, the trickle-down means that not just the actual construction people on the job sites, but it goes way back. I mean, you've got, of course, you got the trucks thousands of trucks that are involved in the construction projects right now. But then it goes back even farther. The asphalt plants, the construction, the concrete batch plants, the quarries, the people people behind the scenes. I mean, we're talking, tens of thousands of people who are directly and indirectly impacted by what, could possibly be a shutdown of the construction season.
And your organization, Midwest Truckers, represents truckers from a number of different states throughout the Midwest. Is there are we going to be losing truckers from Illinois, just giving up on Illinois and moving to other states? Is there any more of that, or what implications might there be?
Well, we've seen that in the past. I think what we're seeing right now, though, is a fear that, all these trucks are out there. Their big jobs are to work on these construction jobs. A lot of them do it year-round. They'll be doing it in the construction season. During the fall season, they may be stockpiling rock piles. They may be doing other things, in terms of getting, rock tar, that type of stuff, to the other plants in preparation for the construction season. And so it's a year-round, program in terms of keeping this system going. And, the scary part is that all of these companies are, they're there, but they live and die by the appropriation. The state doesn't appropriate, and then all of a sudden the trucking companies have to lay off. And when they do that, then, say the money comes back, a lot of times it's hard to get that money back, or not to get just the money back, but to get the people back to work too.
Yeah, they've had to go out and get another job. They moved on. Maybe they've even moved out of state, depending upon how long that takes. It could take 6 months, and that's the problem. If you're laid off, it'd be one thing if you knew it was going to be a week, or even if you knew it was going to be a month. But given that we didn't pass the budget last year, if they're let go, no one would be able to say for how long you're going to be let go.
Well, and the problem we've seen past over the last decade or so is that because of the fact, really, in prior administrations also, things have been so unsettled that there has been this great fear that we wouldn't get an established program going. And because of that, a lot of people wouldn't make that commitment to say, hey, I'm going to buy more equipment to be able to do this work when the time comes, and, or I'm going to hire more people in anticipation they're going to be able to bid these projects and to have the workforce and the equipment to be able to do the work. If you don't have that certainty of that, then a lot of companies are just saying, the heck with it. I'm not going to stick my neck out, hire more people, buy more equipment, investing millions of dollars for work that I don't know is going to be there.
And so, as you said already, it's just a ripple effect that's going to hit any number of people who are not directly tied to the construction of roads.
And there's a lot of uncertainty there also, because, we're looking, long range. We're looking not just right now, but we're looking down the road. The real issue out there is long-term funding also. We have to do something in terms of long-term funding. The mechanism we have in place right now, 25 years. We haven't, seen a motor fuel tax increase or another type of funding mechanism to get the money there to maybe build that additional lane of roadway we need, or to not just to resurface the road, but to totally rebuild the road that needs to be built. Money that come down to the locals. The locals need the money, just like everybody else. They have bridges that need a lot of work. So, combination of, this proposed constitutional amendment that'll be on the ballot in November. If we can dedicate the money to go for road construction and repair, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars a year that would be available if this constitutional amendment passes in the fall. Combine that also with some sort of another funding mechanism, long-term, to guarantee that we're going to have the money in place to build roads that we need. Everyone will guarantee, or will tell you right now, they know our roads are not in the best shape. They could be in better shape. And the problem is that there's no funding to back it up and to guarantee that we can do a long-term commitment to doing more road program.
All right, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Matt Hart with the Illinois Truckers Association. Thanks for joining us. As you just participated in the Transportation for Illinois Coalition, trying to warn us about various maladies that will come if we don't pass a budget before July 1st, or at least the spending authority for federal funds. One of the points you were making concerned the International Fuel Tax Agreement Program that was referred to as IFTA. And what is that, and why would it matter if we don't have a budget by July 1?
Sure. And a lot of people don't know what IFTA is. IFTA is the International Fuel Tax Agreement. Unlike your automobile, where you drive across the country and you purchase fuel in different states, and the state then collects their motor fuel tax in those states, IFTA is a system for truck drivers to make sure that no state has any advantage over another state based on their fuel tax. And so it was to level the playing field state by state by state on fuel taxes. So for example, if you're an Illinois company and you, trucking company, and you spend 50% of your time in Illinois and 50% of your time in Indiana, to make sure that Indiana doesn't have an advantage of purchasing cheaper fuel over across the border, IFTA basically is a way for trucking companies to report the number of miles that they run, and then they pay an apportioned amount of tax based on their number of miles. So that this trucking company based in Illinois with half their time in Indiana, half their time in Illinois, doesn't matter where they buy their fuel, they're going to fill out a report every quarter that says 50% of my miles were in Indiana and 50% were in Illinois, and I'm going to pay 50% of my fuel tax for Indiana and 50% of my fuel tax for Illinois. And that's apportioned state by state by state based on the number of miles that you run. And trucking companies pay that quarterly, file that quarterly. And it's a network that the lower 48 states all participate in, so that you don't have to get a fuel permit when you go from Illinois to Indiana or from Indiana to Ohio, as we did many decades ago. The problem that we are facing today in Illinois under IFTA is that the state of Illinois, which is a member of IFTA, the International Fuel Tax Agreement, has been collecting money for IFTA. And it's money that trucking companies in Wyoming and trucking companies in Ohio and trucking companies in Wisconsin, when they cross through Illinois and they have filled out their quarterly reports and have said, I've run miles in Illinois and I need to pay my Illinois fuel tax. And some of that tax has been collected by the state of Illinois that is due back to the other states and the jurisdictions. Because Illinois hasn't had the legal appropriations authority since July 1, 2015, we haven't made any payments to any of those member states. And so you've got 47 other states with their hand open saying, wait a second, state of Illinois, we've been paying you, but you haven't been returning any of our IFTA money that is due back to our carriers. And right now the Illinois Department of Revenue says that figures over $9 million is what we owe to other states in the IFTA system. Our concern at the Illinois Trucking Association is that IFTA eventually is going to get tired of not getting their payments, is going to tell Illinois, listen, you haven't paid up, so we're going to kick you out of the International Fuel Tax Agreement. If that occurs, then every truck coming into the state of Illinois would have to purchase a fuel permit. And every Illinois-based carrier that leaves the state to do business would then have to buy a fuel permit in those other jurisdictions if we're no longer part of IFTA. And that's our largest concern, is that that would create what we believe would be utter chaos in the trucking industry because so much interstate trucking occurs in and around the state of Illinois.
Yeah, and that's, this is something that we as Americans just take for granted, that we can go from one state to the next, and you don't have to have a passport. To use that as an analogy, if the Illinois truckers had to be getting a fuel certificate or permit in every state, it's almost the equivalent of if we as a citizen had to have a passport every time we left Illinois to go to some other state. It just becomes bureaucratically a nightmare.
Exactly. Imagine the next time you go on a family vacation, you say you drive from Illinois to Florida and you go through Kentucky and Tennessee and Georgia and Florida. Imagine having to stop at every single state and get a permit so that you can purchase fuel and pay their fuel tax in each one of those states. And that's what IFTA, the solution that IFTA provided, is that it provided a place to where truckers didn't have to get permits state by state by state. And it's a system that's been operating for decades. But we run the risk of being kicked out of IFTA if we're not living up to our obligation to IFTA. And right now, legally, we don't have the appropriate authority to live up to our obligation to IFTA. And that's what concerns us at the Illinois Trucking Association.
Aside from the permitting, does it also mean Illinois wouldn't be getting some of these monies and these are federal dollars, I guess, are they not? Am I saying that wrong?
They're not federal dollars. They're dollars that trucking companies pay for fuel tax that are collected in the other states, and then they all go through. There's the international fuel tax agreement system. It funnels back to the states based on the quarterly reports that trucking companies provide, where that money should go. And even the one other risk we have too is that right now we have several Illinois-based trucking companies that are issued refunds due to them through IFTA. And again, we don't have legal authority to make those payments as well. That's over $4 million that we owe our own Illinois-based trucking companies.
We the state of Illinois.
The state of Illinois. These are quarterly reports that were filled out last September, filled out last December, filled out this spring, where we've said, we the trucking company have traveled these different states and we've overpaid for fuel, and we should be given a refund based on the taxes that we've overpaid. And the state of Illinois owes over $4 million to Illinois-based carriers, in IFTA-based carriers as well.
How many carriers are there in Illinois?
There's roughly about 26,000 trucking companies total in the state of Illinois.
Well, we, for everyone's sake, hope a budget deal is reached, and we appreciate you for joining us.
Great, thank you very much.